What's going on, folks? I just want to welcome you to the end of your 8th grade science. This is your final exam. It looks long, it looks daunting, but hey, check this out. It's only like 4 questions long. It will end up giving you a long document, but hey, I wanted to basically give you an opportunity to answer these questions, to kind of express your creative juices, and to really kind of go away from the norm, away from what the rest of the rest of your science final exams are like. I don't want to do like no multiple choice thing. I'm bored of that. I'd rather you folks be a little bit more creative. So check out this final exam that we created. Let's pretend that you are a scientist slash astronaut slash adventurer slash epic person slash student. You don't have to pretend very hard because you're most of these things. I think that you students are epic people and very adventurous and a scientist. You might not be an astronaut, but hey, maybe one day. And you work for this company called Mako Labs, and it allows you to travel the world and beyond. Um, you keep a scientific journal in which you write interesting entries about your adventures. Later, you're going to post these to your millions of followers on Facebook or tweet them to Twitter things or the Pinterest it or I don't know, Fandango it. No, wait, Fandango's for the movies, so I guess you wouldn't do that. But um, or blog it. You're going to blog it. That's actually probably the best way I would write this. So that you're posting in this journal to this blog. So you basically telling everybody about your adventures because you're such an epic person and everyone loves following you and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how you're going to submit to me your answers. You could write up a Microsoft Word document or something like that, or Google Doc or whatever, and just kind of write out this story or this journal, or you can even create a blog or even create a skit or even do like a video journal or an audio journal where you like can talk about your adventures. And as long as you kind of get all the information across, I would accept your final exam in any format you want, just because I think that you folks are pretty creative. I'm always interested in seeing what you guys do. All right, so let's try this one out. Day one. This is the first question. I'll start you off with a prompt on all of these things, and then you can kind of finish it. In quotation marks, the um, I kind of have the basically what you would want to start your journal off, and then as bullet points, I kind of have hints as to what you might want to talk about. So day one, in my scientific studies, I spent the last few years exploring plate tectonics. I was brought in as an expert on an expedition to explore the plate boundary in a new submarine that was just commissioned by Mako Labs. So, you see, there's three ways that plates can interact with each other. I drew a diagram to help explain my discoveries. So, number one, talk about each of these types of interactions in a general sort of way, and how these plates interact with each other. Use words like divergent, convergent, lateral slipping, all of that kind of stuff. Can talk about these types of movements. Don't give me just like 3 sentences. Really use this as a prompt to kind of get you into this story and write a story about, like you're explaining to people these different kinds of things because they're your followers on your blog and whatever, and you want to show off your knowledge and whatnot, and talk about it in kind of a general way. And then based off of the picture that you drew, remember this is the picture that you drew up here, talk about the type of these interaction, or what type of interaction you classified this as. It looks like a very specific type of interaction. And how would you know? I mean, explain why you think that. You're going to actually go into a little bit more detail over here in the second part. The second part says, use the following words to help fill in the blanks. So here's your words that you can choose from. And just to give you a heads up, there's 10 words here, but there's only 9 slots. That's done on purpose, just to kind of, just so that you can't necessarily use the process of elimination on this one. You can, you have to know a little bit more to fill those in. Um, but the problem is you can't answer these. You can't just simply like click in this thing and say, "Oh, hey, you know, type in your answer." This isn't a fill in the word game. Um, what I want you to do is use the diagram and the words that you would fill in. Maybe just print this out and write it in by hand or something like that. Use it as a prompt to kind of guide you and help you write your story about your adventures. Talk about the position of each of these items and how you are able to identify the type of plate interaction based on the location of each of these items. For example, I think one of the options is volcanoes. I'm going to give you a freebie, number 6 right here. Those look like volcanoes to me. This right here is land, so those must be volcanoes. If those are volcanoes, then what you could say is, you know, in my studies, we went down in the submarine and we dived and we checked it out. But when we surfaced, we went to lunch over, on land at a restaurant nearby, and we noticed that there's some volcanoes over on the land. From this, I was able to kind of draw the conclusion that the type of interaction between these two plates is blah blah blah. And the reason being is because when volcanoes are positioned on one side of the plate, then those interactions would be blah blah blah. And you guys see what I'm getting at here? So kind of use the picture to help describe the words. All right, day 2, question number 2. Mako has sent you to the South Pole and Antarctica. Yesterday, you got reports of one of the largest earthquakes in. Maybe I should put that as today because yesterday would be day 1. That wouldn't really make sense. Today, I got reports of one of the largest earthquakes in recorded history in the North Pole. As soon as I heard about it, I pulled out my portable seismograph and I invented, because you're an awesome, epic person, to measure the waves that you found in the ground. So talk about here, use this kind of as an opportunity to talk about the P waves and the S waves and the different characteristics of each of these waves. Explain what type of wave you found and why you found them. Talk about the different mediums and how S waves and P waves travel through and explain why. Talk about how this this measurement is significant to knowing what the interior of the Earth looks like and whatnot. Then the second kind of half of the question is, later that evening you called your friend Benjamin in Hawaii to ask about the waves that he measured. Because he is also, a geologist as well, and so he's going to take out his seismograph and figure out what the waves that he measured are. So he told you about the different types of waves and the order in which they arrive. So that's kind of what I want you to talk about. Think about, well, which kind of waves would he measure, and what order would they arrive, and where is Hawaii relative to the location of the North Pole and the South Pole? Kind of think about that one. All right, so Griffin's a good friend of mine. He works as an editor for a popular surf magazine in Hawaii. For years now, by the way, this is day 3. For years now, he's been asking you to write articles for his surf magazine that are a little bit more scientific based, because you're probably one of the smartest people he knows. Besides, of course, his father, whose name is Tosh. So every month, Griffin publishes a tide chart to help the surfers in Hawaii. He sent you the link, and you click on the link. Right now, that link is broken, but should bring you to a page that looks kind of like this. Let's zoomed in a little bit. Let me see. It would look kind of like this. This is a tide chart for the month, and this is actually this month. Let's zoom in a little bit more, and we'll take a little bit closer look at it. So it's kind of like, here's your high tide, low tide. Actually, this is around the date we're at. So here's your high tide, low tide, high tide, low tide. And so what you want to do is you want to answer questions about this graph or chart. You notice that there's a lot of letters coming into the editor asking for explanations as to the scientific background behind those tides and the waves. And so he asks you to write the article, and here's what you've got so far. In your article, you need to address the questions that these kids wrote to this surf magazine. So here's one of them. Mr. Editor, why are there 2 high tides and 2 low tides every day? So notice in the picture that you've got a high tide and a high tide and a low tide and a low tide all happening in one day. Why is that? Why is there 2? And why are there higher high tides and lower low tides this week, but the week after is going to have high tides and low tides that are not as big? For example, you got a high tide of 1.4 and the highest tide over here is 1.4. The lowest tide is negative 0.2. Whereas next week, your highest tide is 1.2 and your lowest tide is only 0.2. So what's up with that? Why is this week the high tide is higher and the low tide is lower, as opposed to next week where everything is just kind of meh? Also, please talk about the characteristics of each of these waves. One reader writes, "Dear editor, she's a little girl who sometimes goes surfing, and when she goes surfing, the radio says that it's 6 to 8 feet. Being that she's a little girl, that's pretty awesome that she's going out and surfing 6 to 8 feet waves. But when she goes to the beach, she noticed the old surfer guys say that the waves are actually 3 to 4 feet. Why is there a difference? They're looking at the same wave, and who is right according to how science measures waves?" And then also another student kid writes, "How do you measure wavelength, and how does this affect the frequency in which the waves hit the shore?" Assuming, of course, that they travel at the same speed. All right, and the last one is more of a math-based one. So this is the one where you're going to have to basically show me all of your work. If you want, you can write it down and scan it, or you can use Equation Editor in any kind of Word program that you're using or whatever. All right, so here's what it is. For the most part, or for the past year now, you've been working with NASA to design a satellite that will orbit the nearest star. With the rocket boosters that you have, it can go half the speed of light. The speed of light is 2.998 times 10 to the 8th meters per second. So half of that is about 1.5, but I mean, you folks should calculate that out, not just use the calculation that Mr. Dog just in his head. The scientists at NASA would like for you to explain your calculations to them. So what you need to do is convert the speed of light that is traveling in meters per second to miles per hour so that these Americans can know what the rest of the world is talking about. Show all of your work. Use the correct amount of significant figures and put your final answer in the correct scientific notation. All right, Shiloh is an astronomer based in Hawaii, and she calculated the distance to the nearest star is 271,000 AU. By the way, an AU is the measurement of the distance between the Earth and the Sun. So apparently that distance, if you multiply it by 271,000, that's the distance to the nearest star. How far is 1 AU? Well, it's 149,597,871 kilometers. So figure out how long it will take you if you were to travel at half the speed of light in order to get to the nearest star for your satellite. And how long would you have to wait for this thing to arrive? And put your answer in the correct scientific notation and significant figures as usual. So basically, that's your final exam. Have fun with it. Really just enjoy this process. I want you to give me more than just, a few sentences for each answer. I want you to really kind of get into this thing. Write this journal. You can even, I don't know, create a website or whatever. Don't stress you out and just completely, pull out all your hair over it, but also don't just kind of write it off. Work hard at this thing. Take pride in what you do. And it was a pleasure, a really fun time working with you this year. I'm just so excited, and if you ever have a chance to continue on with more science, I would highly encourage it. Um, Especially since you guys are eighth graders, you guys have about at least 3 more years of science ahead of you. So, really enjoy it. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Aloha. I miss you guys.